This episode is made possible by NetSuite by Oracle and Brex, the AI-powered spend platform.
Hi, this is Joel Campbell, CFO of TreviPay, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1017.
But for me, I look at two roles, my head of FP&A and my controller, need to be my right and left hand. And not only from the standpoint of just they need to be talented people, I need to be able to speak to people. I would tell you if you're my FP&A lead or my controller lead, you probably know 95% of what's going on in the company with me because better decisions are made when there's more than one point of view in the room. For me, that's what I look for the most. Yeah, oftentimes you're, especially walking into the size of company Nintex, you're going to find talented people and you assess the team. Where do we got upside? Where do we got exposure? And then you build from that.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Eric Emans, CFO of Nintex. As CFO of Nintex, Eric Emans tells us he has sought to foster a culture where team members are encouraged to go beyond their job descriptions. He uses the metaphor of the left hand and right hand to describe the importance of both controllership and FP&A. Not only do they need to be talented, says Emans regarding his senior leaders, but I need to be able to speak to them about almost everything going on in the company. Eric Emans shares his CFO mindset and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. CFOs and controllers, does expense management feel like a necessary evil? It's time to switch to Brex. Brex automates and accelerates spend management with easy-to-use corporate cards, travel, expense management, and bill pay, all on one AI-powered platform. Brex makes it easy to boost efficiency and compliance enterprise-wide and free up your managers, employees, and accounting team for higher impact work. Top companies from startups to enterprises are using Brex to automate manual work and transform their finance operations. We're talking DoorDash, Robinhood, Airtable, and countless other industry leaders. Ready to join them? Switch to AI-powered spend management at Brex.com. Hello, we're speaking to Eric Emans, CFO of Nintex. Eric, welcome.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Eric, as always, we're going to ask you to look back, and what we're looking for are those experiences you feel prepared you for a CFO role. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would tell you is this is actually a second career for me. I have a degree in sociology and a minor in psychology, and I won't get into where I started my career, but I knew very quickly that I did not want to go forward with that, and went back, a little bit of a humbling experience, community college, and then back to a four-year university to get my BA in business administration, and ended up starting with Deloitte. But there are really three things I think about in my career journey. Like very early on when I decided to leave public accounting, I really looked for a person and a mentor that I could go after, much more so than looking for a specific company. I kind of came out during, post the .com boom, and really what I was looking for is somebody that had public accounting experience, and they could really see me as where I was leaving public accounting, and then help me then mentor my career. And I found a great mentor in the company I went to work for. He was formerly a big five at the time, partner, and had been in private industry for a while. And so I knew that he would be able to, grow my career, and he put me in rooms I shouldn't have probably been in. And he asked me not to say anything. And then eventually I said some stuff, and then he told me not what to say. So I would say that very early on is what I always tell people is look for a person. Don't look for the company per se.
And can I just ask you, and I know you said two other items, I don't want to disturb your flow of thought there.
No worries.
But just the notion that while you're at Deloitte,
again, you had this opportunity to look into different client accounts and customers, and you're looking for a mentor, though. You want to land in industry where there's someone who you know is going to take a little extra time for you, or wants you to begin building your career, and you're looking for that individual. And you had that mindset back then. It wasn't just a title or a job. It was, let me find somebody who's going to give me some direction as well. Am I right about that, or would you?
That's absolutely right. I mean, in the 3 years I was at Deloitte, a lot of people left for private, left public accounting into industry, and really smart people, probably smarter than me. And then I saw that they didn't end up where they wanted to end up. And so when I made the decision finally, which was really driven by Sarbanes-Oxley, and I decided I wanted to move across into industry, and I felt that the job as an auditor was going to change dramatically. That's really what I saw out, and I think also it goes a little bit into company size. I went into kind of a smaller public company. It was called InfoSpace at the time, and then eventually was Blue Cora. But mid-market where I could get a lot of exposure, I wasn't going to end up going someplace and doing accounts payable or prepaid expenses at some massive company. Someplace where you could go, you could learn, you could be across a lot of things, and then finding the right person that would hopefully take me into those rooms and learn from others, and just hearing people strategically think and make their decisions is kind of really how I, very early on in my career.
What geography were you in for Deloitte?
I was in the assurance practice, so auditor.
No, but
Seattle area.
I think it's interesting. You joined them in 1999, and of course, we know the dot-com bubble bursts. As you mentioned, a year or two into your tenure there, and you must have felt fortunate in certain ways. I mean, you joined Deloitte, which is sort of not exactly it's experiencing some pain, no doubt, but nothing compared to what was happening to so many of those small firms. And then you move on in 2003, where most of the wreckage is already done. The damage is done, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah, no, it was very fortunate, and I did go to work for a client. I was obviously not at the level where that was prohibited through Sarbanes-Oxley, but I did have some familiarity with the client, as well as had worked for the person that ended up being my boss. So I got a little try before you buy, which was also nice. But I did really look at it through that lens of mentoring. I think the second thing that is just really helped me in my career is just how to drive change. And to me, it's a very people-centric approach. For me, the number one rule of trying to drive change is just don't put anybody in a defensive posture. And to do that, I think you really need to, figure out why somebody's doing something. Like this is, I think too easy. And you saw this a lot in the auditing profession. You come in and you can be like, wow, I can't believe anybody's doing it this way or that way. There's such a better way of doing it. And what I've learned about driving change is if you actually go to those people and you ask them, hey, talk to me about why you're doing this, why it's important. And then the most important question is, if you could do it differently, what would you do? And I think, 9 times out of 10, and I've been through a lot of acquisitions. I think one in particular, we acquired a company called TaxAct. We're a Seattle-based company. TaxAct's headquarters was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so very Midwestern culture. And for me, it was getting into Cedar Rapids, meeting people, learning about what they did. And then as you start attacking, integration points, really understanding why somebody is doing something. And then, like I said, what would you do differently? Like half the time the answer came from the person that was involved in the process versus me coming and dictating. And you're saying, hey, I've seen it done this way or that way. But ultimately at the end of the day is like change is driven when people start to see things commonly, right? Like, everybody understands the objective of what we're trying to solve, and then they feel like they're part of the process. And I see it way too often. Somebody goes in and goes, wow, that's just not a great way of doing it. You should do that differently, and immediately put somebody in a defensive posture. And I think that's really accelerated my career, is just that people-centric approach, getting the trust built and learning, how they would do it differently. And then the last one was after I was a CFO and, working with some very, experienced executive leadership team members. I think I worked with this great CHRO. He's actually over at Spencer Stewart now and doing a lot of cultural stuff for them. But, there were challenges. I had one particular CEO that was a very big thinker, and oftentimes would, come into a very big, a room full of people that were there to present on one topic, and he liked to brainstorm. He liked to throw things out, and so what often ended up is we didn't always talk about what was supposed to be in the meeting, and you kind of sent 10 to 12 people sideways, as now their whole world has been reprioritized, and it quite frankly, it used to drive me a little crazy. And working with this individual, and I shared with him, and he's kind of somebody as I think about can mentor me, and he's like, what are you trying to change here? And I said, well, the behavior is driving me crazy. And he said, look, you can never change people's behavior. You actually have to change the way they think. And so you have to attack the thinking, not the behavior at the end of the day. And so understand why that person comes in the room and does that. Is that because maybe in this case, he wasn't getting that opportunity to do it with the executive leadership team. So we needed to create opportunities where we could have those brainstorming sessions as an executive leadership team. And so we then kind of compartmentalize that a little bit from differently than some of the broader meetings where some of the more junior people would say, oh my gosh, the senior leader just told me to do something and now I'm going to go do it, when actually he wasn't telling you to do something. He was just thinking out loud. And so that's probably the third thing that's really helped me in my career is just really focus on the thinking behind behavior instead of actually focusing on the behavior.
I want to just point out for listeners that this one company, InfoSpace, played a really important part in your career building. I mean, that's largely where you climbed the rank and file and eventually entered the CFO office. Is that an abbreviated edition, or what else would you tell us?
So yeah. So I would say it was a lot of climbing and a lot of hard work. I did leave the company for a brief stint, and largely, I had a really good opportunity with some people that had left the company and started a division at a company called Corbis. But ultimately, it was in their emerging markets group. It was a very different culture, and while we were successful, we weren't growing, and it wasn't going to grow my career the way I thought. And so I reconnected with my former boss and mentor, who I mentioned earlier. He had ascended into the CFO chair. The interesting thing about InfoSpace, which eventually became Blue Cora in a name change, is the four CFOs that were there. Three of them actually came up through the ranks, and so it was a place that knew it had a high reputation for the finance talent. And yeah, I went back in a controller role in a lot of ways to help the company sell itself. And then that was about 2007, and then we completed a couple transactions, and we didn't sell the entire company. And in 2008, we kind of reversed course, and a lot of the top executives stepped away. A new CFO came in the chair, and they asked me to move up into the chief accounting officer role. And we actually decided to change strategy and go actually start acquiring companies back up, because the asset that we had and the had left wasn't a great public company asset, and we needed to build around it. We also had a very outsized tax asset that we thought we could bring value to. So it's a very financially driven story. And then you fast forward about 3 years, and the CFO that had taken the role decided to move on to something else, and they asked me to assume the role. I was interim CFO for about 3 or 4 months, and then they decided to formalize it in 2011.
Now, you joined InfoSpace really as an accountant, but along the way, it's clear you become more of an FP&A oriented executive. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, the great part about the CFOs that I've worked for at InfoSpace were it was viewed as one team. So there wasn't like this accounting group and this finance group. I mean, obviously we had our respective disciplines, but there was a lot of cross-pollination, and oftentimes some of the best finance people actually came off of the accounting team. There were two folks in addition to myself that took that track. I would say, yeah, look, I'm trained by just being around smart people, but I would also say, like, I really built my career in accounting, and some of this I think is Sarbanes-Oxley, but just in general, how I think about, why accountants are so valuable to an organization is they actually see transactions enter the building all the way to the financial statements. And if you're really curious about that, you can learn a ton about a business of like how this all the way flows through. And so I actually built a lot of my knowledge that helped me in finance and in understanding the actual financial operations of a company, of how, I've always been in technology, so lots of ones and zeros, but like, how all these things work together. And I didn't spend a lot of time at my desk or in my office. I spent a lot of time, meeting people. And my first foray into it was really into business intelligence and data and analytics, because, that makes for a great a finance organization if you actually can, do measurement and understand what's going on in the business. And so between that and working with really good FP&A people, I kind of developed that skill set.
Oh, well, that's a nice overview. I should point out that you went to, you've had multiple CFO roles today before joining Nintex as CFO. Well, we might have a few more career-related questions for you a little later in the episode, but right now, let's find out about Nintex. Tell us about this company. What is it about today?
Yeah, look, we are a global company that we like to say we set the standard for process intelligence and automation. We have over 8,000 customers, private and public sector organizations from 90 countries that are using our process platform to accelerate and optimize and do digital transformation. For me personally, like when I went to look at this company, it not only, did I like the role and the aperture of the CFO and what it was going to let me do, because I run IT, I run data and analytics and pricing, so it's a wider aperture than traditionally you will have at a private equity backed company. So I really like that aspect of it, but I really liked its mission. I mean, for me, I've always felt like finance itself has to, constantly be giving back to the bottom line and scaling. And the other thing is over my career is how you kept people is you make sure they're working on the highest value tasks. They're not working on, these things that a machine could do or a process could do. And so like the technology just resonated for me is like, this is a lot of stuff that I've been driving in my own organizations, whether it be through IT or I drive it directly as a line of business owner as the CFO. And so that was a really good fit. And then now in this day and age of AI, which is now going to sit at the center of like, how do we actually not replace, but like, how do we make automation quicker and more seamless and allow people to build? That's what I really like about the company. I mean, quite frankly, I like to think of it as like we give people time back to work on higher value things, and employees are your highest valued asset, especially in a technology company. So that's really what I like about Nintex. And then the other thing I would say, just the global footprint. Most of my career I'd spent in pretty U.S. domestic companies, and we have offices all over the world, and developers in Johannesburg, and headquarters in Melbourne, Australia, and the UK. And so I really like the global footprint of the company, our customers, and especially our people.
Was it always private equity backed? I don't think so. Was it originally venture? Could you give us maybe just an abbreviated history of its capital structure?
Yeah, so I've been there about 2 years, and so I'm going to be a little weaker on the earlier history, but it was a company that actually did start out of Melbourne, Australia. I believe it was venture-backed, but it had been previously owned by TA Associates, then Thoma Bravo, and now TPG. So call it the last 8 years of its life, give or take a year, has really been in private equity. TPG bought the majority share in November of 21, and I joined in February of 2022. So all my journey has been with TPG as the lead investor.
And what are the PE-backed companies? We know they run on metrics. What would you tell us about the top of mind numbers for you? What are you always looking at as you enter the office?
Well, yeah. So we are a SaaS company. So looking at ARR is the number one metric, and then obviously what goes around that, your GRR, or your churn and your downsell, and then your NRR, your net revenue retention. So where are you getting your expansion in your existing customer base? Spend a lot of time looking at new logo and where we're being successful there. Regions, products, and so like I would say. I do spend a fair amount of my time in kind of that ARR bookings world and really dividing it down into like, the 4 regions that we track, which are AMER, Europe, Middle East and Northern Africa, and Asia Pacific. And then, I'm also a big scale person though. And I think that was part of, the attraction to me on my candidacy is, it's this is the point in a company's journey where, yes, you got to fund growth and you got to grow quick, but you also got to scale your operations. And so, the company under the Tomo Bravo years and previously TA Associates had grown a lot through acquisition. And look, I think there was a fair amount of integration done, but there was also kind of a fair amount of delayed integration that needed to be done, as you want to scale and have a great operating company. And so I spent a lot of time looking at, capital allocation models of like how much of our, bookings are going to come in and fund R&D and what portions of R&D, a lot of stuff on gross margin. As you can imagine, one of the number one drivers of our cost base is just cloud costs. So Azure, AWS, those types of things. So those are primarily what I look at. And then look, all my career I've been in technology, so it's people, right? And I think the biggest thing with managing technology businesses is as you're growing, it's great, you're expanding, you're getting more people in, but as times are tough, when oftentimes 60 to 70% of your cost base are tied up in your people, it can also be challenging, right? Because cost constraint, having to cost reduce, and it impacts people. And so I spent a lot of time making sure that, like, as we're expanding and we're growing our fixed costs, that we're doing it in the right way and in a responsible way, that we're not going to impact people in the wrong way.
Is there something that perhaps you've done to make visible the costs associated with people, or help hiring managers better understand, why this threshold we can't pass, or whether it's you stepping into a meeting that you hadn't participated in regularly, or the CFO had? I don't know.
Look, I'll tell you, the number one thing that I do on people planning costs is I just look everything on a run rate basis. I think that the thing, and it's funny, like, you're working with very experienced people that have owned budgets for a long period of time. Whenever you're looking about hiring somebody midway through a year, you have to do two calculations. One, the in-year impact of the expense, but then two, what your cost structure looks like the following year. And it's funny sometimes the way people's faces light up when you go, wow, I never thought about it that way. I'm hiring somebody, let's say you're December 31st year in, you hire somebody in November, and you say, look, it's a $120,000 a year person. Oh, that's only going to cost me $20,000. No, actually your cost structure is up $120,000. And when you look year on year, that $20,000 is going to $120,000. So your growth rate is going to be really high. So as you think about, how you manage people and when you bring them into the building, and what is it, what is the criteria for expanding? I really focus people on that. And then also I'm very metric, and it, like, not from the standpoint of like, hey, show me how many AP invoices you're going to process, but like I work with R&D people all the time. So like, what's your ratios, right? If we're going to run an agile process, what is your typical Scrum team size? What are they made up with? And then, how many of those do you need? And then what's your ratio for leadership over the top of it? And just figuring out those things with your fellow executive leadership team members, especially around people, it just, I like to take the gray out of things. So like, we're all speaking the same language. When we make a decision, we understand the implications of it, and then we move forward.
What about, you mentioned how you were looking perhaps at the customer relationships by geography. I mean, and maybe you would characterize that differently, but it just caught my attention. I was like, well, I wonder if suddenly one geography customer retention is an issue. Why would that be? I mean, is that something that you would hope to make visible, or is that something you encounter? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny. It's like you're in some of our meetings. We actually have had some of those things in certain regions where we're seeing churn on a particular product hire. I think the other thing I look at is, just because we've grown in acquisition and also internationally, is that it's funny that how some of our smaller regions are outperforming our larger regions on certain products, just because that's where that product started. And yes, so part of that is the customer base, and you're in a SaaS business, you're always getting growth from expansion as well as new logo, but it also can also indicate like, hey, maybe we don't have the right, the transference of the motion that is being run in one region isn't actually being run correctly in the other region, and what can we learn from one another? So I would say that's the, yes, on the churn piece, but also just on the growth piece of like, why is APAC getting outsized growth compared to Europe on a particular product? That doesn't make sense to me. So let's go take a look at that.
What about you organizing your people as you joined the team back in time? And initially, you probably took a wait and see, but then you thought, we could do this differently. Here's where I think I need my FP&A talent, or whatever it might be. Can you tell us how you might have made some changes or tweaked your organization?
Yeah, look, I'm not a person that comes in and brings all my people with me. I think that the sign of any good leader is you come in, you assess, and this may sound terrible, but like I kind of think of net positive, net negative, right? And so like, and even me, right? I'm sure if you ask my CEO right now, he'd say, look, Eric's a net positive, but I wish he was better at some of these things, and he's great in these things. And so, um, look, if I come in and assess you're a net negative, then I will go make a change. I think that's pretty rare. Um, but for me, like I look at two roles, like my head of FP&A and my controller, need to be my right and left hand, and not only from the standpoint of just they need to be talented people. I need to be able to speak to people, right? Like I would tell you, if you're my FP&A lead or my controller lead, you probably know 95% of what's going on in the company with me, because better decisions are made when there's better decisions are made when there's more than one point of view in the room. And so for me, that's what I look for the most. Yeah, oftentimes you're especially walking into like the size of company Nintex with, you're going to find talented people, and certainly I have gone through some turnover. Some of it were people wanting to go do something different. Some of it was just I wanted more collaboration, people in person more often, and we were a very remote group. And so the opportunity to bring people where I could get in and whiteboard with them and collaborate and solve problems together. So we have gone through some change. But look, for me, you just can't come in and go, hey, I need all these different things. Now, the one thing I will tell you, or I want all of my people, you assess the team. Where do we got upside? Where do we got exposure? And then you build from that. I will say there are certain contractors that I use that know me pretty well, and when I come in to assess an organization, but that's usually more on the financial operations side of how information's flowing in data and analytics, and like, are we seeing things clearly, or can we be doing a better job? But I have had a decent amount of changeover in the FP&A side. I think it's been for the positive for everyone. I think the people that moved on have moved on to bigger and better opportunities, and the folks that I brought in, I think are a really good match for me.
I want to touch on AI with you. Can you provide any insight into the company's strategy for adopting and integrating AI technologies? What would you tell us?
I think just in our product, it's going to sit at the center. It's just going to, make for a better customer experience of how do you get a workflow set up, and you can talk to the thing and it can now reference a catalog and come back to you and say, here's this, hey, I want to do quote to cash, and here's the 7 different ways, companies do quote to cash, and here are all the different things you should consider. You can do a lot of it with, voice and just talking to the machine, which is sometimes fun to watch. I also think customer support is a huge opportunity of like getting really robust customer support. I think the challenge, though, honestly, with all AI is just the data that you're running up against and making sure it is the right data, and making sure that also your AI is staying very focused to what you want it to do and not answering random questions. I even honestly get a little bit more excited. Not, I love it in our products, but just even like what can it do for us day to day? You think about, old code, for example, in my R&D team. Can they use AI to go and, look at, dated code and how we can, maybe move that and more quickly move it forward, or have some of that automated? I look at some of your vendor costs, cloud computing is really hard to understand in price, and if there's any opportunity to use AI and technology to make better cost decisions and how we're implementing our stuff and building things into the cloud. And so I think it's good for everything. What I always just keep in the back of my mind is like, it's only as good as the data that it's looking at, and that's where I start with anything.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. We're going to move to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment. And what we're looking for is a moment in time where you experienced some insight, an aha perhaps, that reveals how you believe finance plays a strategic role. Does anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
It does. And I mean, I would say that like it was like, I wish somebody would have said this earlier on in my career. I feel like I was mentored this way, so it was okay. But like, I talked a little bit about, I think the best accounting people. I'd even extend it to finance people, like really understanding like the financial operations of a company, how transactions enter the building, all the way to a financial statement. But I think the most for me is like, is like, I see the fear of failure be so detrimental to so many people early in their career. And I think in people's minds, like failing is like so outsized to the, like, look, don't take the company off the side, the side of the road. But like most of the stuff you're dealing with when you're up and coming and learning, you know, you're expected to fail because that's how you learn. And I think, for me, with my teams and where I feel like we're really driving that expectation based culture in an organization, which is what I think a finance organization should do, is where you get people that are, they're going and meeting with the people and trying to understand the business and be a business partner, but also putting themselves out there and saying, and driving insights and challenging and showing different ways. And yeah, sometimes you're going to mess up. It's part of the deal. And I've messed up plenty in my career, but I learned, the amount I've learned from failing or not getting something right is so different than the amount that I've learned from getting, those certain things right. And so like, to me, that has always been the strategic unlock for my finance teams is like, yeah, I know what's in your job description and I know every day you're supposed to show up and do this, but like, how are you thinking, like, hey, finance person, I need you to go do this analysis. And if they just hand me back the analysis, that's great. But if they actually go, hey, I thought about the analysis, and this is what I think you're trying to understand. And so here's some other things I brought into the analysis, and like that kind of thinking to me and driving that through an organization has been, the difference between great organizations and good organizations in finance for me. And so that's probably what I point to is like, don't let the fear of failure, don't let your job description keep you in your office. Go out, meet people, learn about the business, get excited, do demos, talk to folks in different disciplines throughout the company, learn about how the company works together, how engineering works with IT and IT works with data governance and all these different things. And like you're going to become a very powerful business person that happens to have a discipline in accounting or finance or whatever it is.
37,000, 25, 1. These are the three numbers to remember to get the visibility and control you need to make the right business decisions instantly. 37,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down expenses. 1. Because your business is one of a kind, you should get a customized solution for all of your KPIs in one efficient system and with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need, all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/KPI. That's netsuite.com/KPI.
We're going to jump to our mentoring round where we'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire our future finance leaders. We want you to think back. It was at Blucora, I guess, where you were the interim CFO and then you stepped into the CFO role for the first time, really. We're wondering, all you knew, and again, you explained to us how you had a good mentor over time who was there to help you, but still, there must have been something you wish someone had told you as you got there. And no matter what, you can never be prepared for everything. Anything that you wish somebody had told you about that role as you stepped into it for the first time?
I look, I consider myself to be pretty self-aware, and so like, I'm comfortable with who I am, and so what I would say for me, and I won't say like it was kind of I knew it, and the great part about that situation was the audit committee chair on the board, who was just amazing, you know I basically said, hey, I need to be able to call you and not talk to you as the audit committee chair. I need to talk to you as a former CFO, because there are going to be times where it's going to take a while for me to get my legs under me, and I'm going to need somebody to bounce something off of. The other piece was IR. Like, I went to my IR person and I said, look, I've never done IR before. Like, I've sat in the meetings and all that kind of stuff, but I've never done it. So, like, I need you to tell me when you think I'm doing good, when I'm going down a path that I shouldn't. I knew all the rules, but like, how do you connect with those people? How do you keep the conversations consistent? And so for me, it was really finding people around me that would tell me when they didn't think I knew what I was doing, or would challenge me when before I would make a mistake. And so I know it's not like some aha moment. I kind of knew it, but I will tell you, like, the best part of it was is people, responded to that. Like, the amount of times I didn't do something stupid because somebody said, "Hey, wait, we should slow down and think about this." I go back to that, and being open to feedback and
Reaching out to people can be very helpful. Hey, Eric, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if there's something a lot of people don't know about you, or most of your colleagues might not know about you. Anything you can share with us? Something you do? Maybe it's out of the office. Who knows? An interest you pursue? Yeah.
Well, look, I have a lot of people say when they meet me, they don't see me as a CFO type, and so I have a lot of hobbies I like. After a lot of years, we were able to have a place on the lake, and I like to wake surf. My wife likes to slalom ski, and so we're very active in water sports. But I think the one thing that would probably shock people is I go back and I said this was my second career. I actually started my career in juvenile rehabilitation, and a lot of people are like, "Wow, I bet you didn't take anything away from that." I was like, no, I disagree. Like, I think you learn to communicate in a whole different level in juvenile rehabilitation. And I think the other thing is, I remember my first day working there. I worked actually in a maximum security juvenile facility. And, I still remember to this day, I went in and my boss told me, he said, "Hey, do you think these kids are stupid?" And I was like, no, I don't have an opinion on that, but why are you asking? He goes, "Look, what you have to understand about these kids is, like, they're smart in ways that society doesn't value. And that doesn't mean that they're not smart. They're just smart in ways that society doesn't value. So don't think for 1 second you're the smartest person in the room when you're in here with just because somebody has gotten into some trouble in their life." And I've taken that with me, outside of, just the juvenile rehabilitation game, is that, make sure that you understand where you're at. And, I hopefully don't come across as the guy that thinks he's super smart in a room, but like, really understand the situation that you're in, the environment that you're in, and then assess, who you can bring to make the best decision, drive the best result. And oftentimes it might not be you. It might be somebody that's more experienced in that. And I think that humbleness, hopefully people would say that I have that humbleness, has really helped me in my career.
We always wonder, or we like to ask for a book selection. Don't know, it might be a resource, even maybe a podcast or something you listen to. Anything come to mind? Whether it's a book or something you escape with, doesn't have to be a business book. I always emphasize that. Yeah.
I actually read a lot of autobiographies. I'm a huge music nut.
Yeah.
There's a band that I just am a huge fan of, called The National, and I've seen them a bunch of times. And any opportunity I can to see them, I'll see them. And I read their story of kind of coming up in the 90s and some of the other bands that they were around. And
tell us something more about them.
It's two brothers. Two sets of brothers and a lead singer. So identical twins that play lead guitar, and then the bass and drum section are another set of brothers. And they all met in Cincinnati. I think predominantly most of them all now live in New York. But people ask me to describe their music, and I always talk about it as, music for the professional, like, because some of just what they talk about, and you can tell they didn't start their lives as, planning to do, be musicians or have that be their life. I think even the lead singer started out in the advertising world, and there's some stuff, early on. And so I think it has always stayed with me, is that very relatable music, even though I'm not even close to, I don't have within my pinky the amount of talent it would take to do what those guys do. But love that band. Highly recommend it to all your listeners.
Thank you for that. I'm glad you spoke up about music. We don't hear about it too often, which is too bad. We are up to our final question, where we're gonna take you back to the office and ask you to look forward for us. And we're wondering what your priorities are over the next 12 months. What would those be as CFO of Nintex?
Yeah, so for us right now, I think it's look, we're a business that is it's got some leverage, and has had some slowed growth, and so I think predominantly for where I'm focused right now is just our existing customer base, making sure that we get our GRR calculation under control, and make sure that we have a good motion that's going into those customers to make sure that they're valuing the products that they have purchased from us, and then opportunities to cross sell or upsell the products we do have. So I know it sounds a little boring, but it is really about growth, and I'd say more focused on our existing business. And then lastly, I think just more broadly, the connection between the chief product officer, the CMO, and the CRO, and how that, we think about our product strategy and the addressable markets and how we go to market and how that motion is, just that triangle, if you will, is where I'm going to spend a lot of my time.
Eric Emans, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Hello, listeners. Jack here. I hope you've been enjoying some of our recent CFO Thought Leader episodes. To better serve you, we need your feedback. And our 2024 listener survey is now live. What do you like about CFO Thought Leader? What don't you like about CFO Thought Leader? This is what we call continuous improvement. We want to serve you better, but we can only do that by hearing from you. You'll find our 2024 survey right on the nav bar at cfothoughtleader.com. To demonstrate our gratitude, survey takers will receive a $10 savings coupon on the purchase of our new book, The CFO 500. Take the survey and the coupon is yours. Please help us serve you better. And as always, thank you for listening.